Well, hello everyone. It's Wednesday, June 15th, 2022, and we're going to start our Healthy Living Together program today. Would like to ask any questions, we'll use the question and answer box. Just a word of warning, your audio is automatically muted. And like I said, you're going to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. And this event is being recorded and the link will be sent out after it's over. So I'd like to introduce our presenter today is Matt Gezequel from the Sandusky Police Department, also of VAPE Kids and a variety of other supports to our community. Today I'm your host. My name is Carolyn McKenzie. I'm the director for Start Collaborative. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt. Please launch in and tell us a little bit about teen vaping.
All right, give me 1 second here. Oops. All right, so I believe you guys are seeing my screen right now with my Vape Man presentation. Okay, let me make that a little bit bigger. Let's see if I can do this way. All right, so as you can see, again, I'm with the Sandusky Police Department. I'm also with Gezequel Police Department, the Safe Kids program. But as a part of that, one of the things I have done is worked with Michigan State Police as a team instructor, and we came up with this, myself and another MSP officer came up with this program called Vaping. It is to educate youth about what vaping can do to your body. And there's a great deal of things that people don't think of, and that's why we're here to kind of continue what we're talking about. Basically, like I said, we're going to ask, what does vaping do to your body? This is the first thing I ask of students when I hold this class, and it's amazing that some will say, oh, nothing, it's just, all the vapor is just it's just water. Well, no, it's not. This is one of the things that can affect your brain. It actually can attack some of the chemicals that they're ingesting can change their prefrontal cortex, which changes their emotions, their decision-making, impulse control, all things that we kind of think are rather important for teens, which is already an issue that some of them may have already, and then having ingested vaping materials can actually affect how that works and how it functions, and in many cases can actually lead them to be, in some cases, very, how do I put this, to a point of almost paranoia due to the fact of the materials that they've been vaping. This is one thing, and this is just talking about the fact that we're exposing our kids to one of the most addictive things in the world, which is nicotine. And Dr. Frances Leslie, University of California, Irvine, she's been studying this stuff for years, but this is one of her famous quotes. A very brief low-dose exposure of nicotine in early adolescence increases the rewarding properties of other drugs, including alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamine, and these are long-term changes. Basically what that means is having ingested the nicotine at such a young age actually makes them more addictive to other drugs in the future. And it actually changes how their brains function and how they perceive those things. So by ingesting nicotine at a younger age, they're actually becoming more addicted to other things, even though that wasn't the intent. The other part of this is there's no long-term studies as to what nicotine can do to your body and your brain. And, she's absolutely right. Her final quote on this page, it's unfortunate that a whole generation of teenagers are basically guinea pigs for the effect of nicotine. And I talk to kids about this, and when I show them this slide, they look at me and go, "You're joking." No, I'm not. And they really kind of jump in and understand to a point that this is something that they really need to look at. E-cigarettes, it'll narrows the arteries and stiffens the arteries up to and by 30%. Basically, this is like having somebody who's, how do I put this? You're talking about stiffening and narrowing of the arteries by 30%. You're now talking about somebody who is 60, 65, who's lived in a life of smoking and not done all these other things and doesn't eat well and doesn't do that, occurring within a brief period of time because of vaping. And we're now seeing this in kids that are 18, 19, 20 having narrower arteries than they're supposed to. And it's caused due to the chemicals that they're ingesting during the vaping. So, you're now looking at, when we're talking about, atherosclerosis and something like that for older people, we're now seeing it in youth because of this change that they're now using. So it's a huge factor that they don't look at. Now this study, this was done, this aortic early stiffness, early warning signs, again, atherosclerosis, you're looking at chances of stroke, aneurysm, all because of vaping. Those things increase by up to 25 and 30% over what they would be for somebody who is of normal age and not vaping. So it's a huge change. Now this DNA damage, this was a very unique study, and this was again that Dr. Frances Leslie that we've seen her earlier quote. She did this study. They basically took, and they're talking about DNA damage to the mouth. They found formaldehyde, acrolein, methyl glycol in these people's mouths after vaping one time. And it was after that. Basically what she did is they paid people who have never vaped to allow them to test their mouths and do DNA samples. They let them vape for one day, and then this is what they found the next day, that the DNA in their mouth had actually changed within one day. So to say that these things are safe and good for you scare me, to say the least. These are some of the things that they're finding in people's lungs after going through this. Nickel, phenol, benzene, formaldehyde, toluene, isopropylene, propylene glycol, acetone, cadmium, okay? None of those are supposed to be in your lungs. And when we're talking about, you're talking about formaldehyde, okay? That's embalming fluid. Probably nothing we should really have in our lungs while we're alive. The propylene glycol, antifreeze, it's a poison. Toluene, a paint thinner, again, not really good to have in your body. The isopropylene, that's actually rubber. And then, cadmium is, it's part of paints, but the other thing is it is also partially and can be radioactive. And we're finding this in people that are vaping only for short times. This is now being found in their lungs. So that's why this becomes so important to us, to make sure that we're getting this education to the kids, because it's more, if they know what they're doing to themselves, there's a better chance that they may make the right decisions. This here, bronchitis, infections of the lungs, severe respiratory illnesses, these things come up within days. They've seen increases in the number of these cases from the first time they start vaping. Why? Because you're ingesting these things into your lungs. Widespread irritation. The chemicals that are in there can irritate the eyes, the skin, the lungs, the mucous membranes in your nose and your mouth. The other thing, when we talk about cigarettes, which is one of the things we do talk about, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation actually, but when we talk about cigarettes, we talk about firsthand and secondhand smoke. With vaping, we talk about firsthand, secondhand, and thirdhand. Because what is a vapor material? Well, that vapor material, when it comes out of your mouth, it's a liquid form. Liquid comes down and it settles. And it settles on everything that you're in the room with. And here's the problem that we're running into when we're talking about skin irritation. Where do kids vape, especially when they're vaping in the schools, or where are they hiding at? They're hiding in the bathrooms. So we're now seeing that because this stuff's coming down in the bathroom, and you might not know what somebody else was doing in the bathroom, but if you go in and use that restroom after them, you've now got that absorbed through your skin. That's the third-hand contact. And it can be anywhere. If someone were to, like in a whole classroom, if someone were to hit a vape in the middle of the room and then exhale it out, you would see it and find it pretty much in every corner of the room with that vape material, because vapor just floats on the air until it settles down. Well, the problem now is we're actually seeing kids in the ERs with some of this irritation of their skin on areas that they didn't know. We're finding kids are showing up or other places, not just kids, but they're showing up with this irritation on their backsides, on their bottoms. Why? Because they used the bathroom after somebody else had just been in there vaping. Now, this material, it might not do anything, but it can, on certain people, cause a severe irritation to a point that they actually need medical treatment for it. So, it is a huge factor when you're talking about that first hand, second hand, third hand. It's a big difference than what we had before. This mucus, this again, Dr. Francis Leslie, University of California, Irvine, they did this study. They let people vape for 3 days. In 3 days, they've seen inflammation of the mucus linings. Mucus production increased by up to 30 to 40% depending on the person. Altered lung functions after 3 days. This is huge. I kind of turned and, I've been on one of the presentations with her, and I kind of asked her, I'm like, how do you get people to do this? And she was like, we have students that are willing to do this on a daily basis, and then once they find out what they've been through, they're like, I'm not sure we were paid enough to be a part of this study. But this is one of those things that people want to know what's going on, but they don't want to tell. The companies that run the vaping materials and the vaping companies don't want you to know all this. So this is why this is a huge portion of what we're going to talk about. Now, this here is a guide, and this red line, and I can't highlight it on my screen, unfortunately, the way I would like to, but the top red line you will see, and that's for 10 to 19 year olds, ages 10 to 19, and you'll see, and this is what they're studying this is emergency room visits for people with lung issues. September 8th, 2019, that number went from, minuscule in 17 to January 17 to minimal to, okay, we jumped a little bit in June of 2019, and all of a sudden there's this huge peak in September of 2019. And what happened right there is this is when many of the companies came out with their flavored vape devices. And when I'm talking flavors, we're talking vanilla, we're talking strawberry mango, we're talking blueberry flavored, bubblegum flavored. And there's probably like 35 or 40 different flavors that are all, and they tell me that these are targeted towards those people adults that smoke. Well, I know a lot of people that smoke. Not one of them's told me I smoke because of the vanilla flavored cigarettes. Okay, I've never heard of that. It's not something that's out there. So when they were marketing this is when this started coming out, and social media started showing more of this, and that was when they were telling us, this was never designed for kids. Oh, bull. Their social media targets were the kids. Whether they want to admit to it or not, that's who was targeted during their social media campaigns. Because at the time when they were doing this, many of us, this wasn't through Facebook, this was through Snapchat, this was through those things. How many of you have some of those social media things or use it enough to have that type of situation? It was the kids that were being targeted. Now, this is alveoli. Alveoli is basically, and it's now being called vape lung. villi is different components, factors, and this is a huge one of their studies that they were doing. And these are people that are coming in and truly being treated because they're vaping with lung issues, problems with their villi network. So it started off being known as EVALI, and it actually changed to vape lung because we're running into it so much. And again, now, here we go, vape lung studies, August. You know, it's a huge factor. Causative of the agents, again, everything that we're coming back to is showing that most of these are caused because of vaping. E-cigarettes, something was done. Many of the patients with have jumped with the EVALI in 16 states. I can tell you now, this study here is outdated because everything now is showing that it's everywhere. Every state has problems with this. Many of you probably heard that there was a 21-year, or I believe he was 18 at the time, 18-year-old student from Michigan who went through a double lung transplant. Well, he went through a double lung transplant because of vape lung. You know, they made a big deal that, oh, he survived. Well, part of that is because of this. And that student, that young man is now going out and doing presentations trying to get other people to stop vaping because he'd only vaped for a short time period when he had to have a double lung transplant to survive. So these are things that the kids don't understand, and it's, you know, our media doesn't cover this because it's not as important or something that they think of as being something out there that is really affecting children as much as it really is. This is huge and scary. This is from 2019. Again, 2,400 hospitalizations across all 50 states. You know, most of them under the age of 35, and actually it's been most of these, especially when we're starting to see some of the tetrahydrogen cannabis, the THC stuff, many of those are under the age of 16, which it's illegal in Michigan to have marijuana or the vape materials that they're entering. But this is some of the problems we're running into, because it's not just the nicotine is the problem. They're being able to get a hold of the marijuana and the THC products and ingest those through the vape materials as well. Vitamin E acetate. Many of you may know vitamin E. It's a great skin. You put it on your skin, but it says do not ingest. But vitamin E acetate, it's a form of vitamin E that has been affected. Basically, it's vitamin E turned into, when you're talking about an acetate, that is a acid. So you now have an acid that's in your lungs. And this is part of the problem and causing some of these problems with this vape lung. And when they're talking about vape lung, they're comparing it to what we used to talk about when we talked about people having popcorn lung. The vape lung is turning these younger people's lungs to look like popcorn lung, which means it's hardening the lungs. It's making the material, instead of being that soft, pliable, nice material, it's turning it into almost like a stiffened, like a popcorn kernel that's been popped, and that's what's forming in their lungs. And this is why we're running into the problems we're running into when we're talking about some of the inhaled products and some of the things that are going on with vape lung. This was again through the CDC. Again, nicotine exposure at a youth age, and when they're talking youth, it's anyone under the age of 24, because your brain's not fully functioned until about the age of 24. So prior to that, it can cause more of an addiction than it would for someone older. Plus, these numbers are, you know, it's causing brain changes. E-cigarettes, 2018, 1 in 5 high school students and 1 in 20 middle schools. I can tell you, just from what we're dealing with vaping within the schools, the high school is probably 1 in 3 right now, as of this past year. And when we're talking middle schoolers, I will digress for a second. I did this presentation a while ago and I had a gentleman sitting in my classroom, and he looked at me and goes, "Oh my God." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You guys just described," and there's a video where we talk, I'm not going to show the whole thing, but I did to them, I showed this video, and it shows, it talks about this kid sitting in the classroom, and they'll have their hands like this, and they said, the guy said, he goes, "I'm sitting there, and the kid's doing this in the middle of his classroom. He thought his hands were cold. Well, then he's seen a blue light, and he's like, what the hell was that?" Well, this guy just turned to me and goes, "Oh my God, I had a kid vaping in my classroom." I said, "Yeah, I'm not surprised at that." He goes, "I'm a 4th grade teacher." So I'm not, it's out there, and these kids are getting a hold of it. So I was shocked, but it is, it's a 4th grader that was caught with it in school. So remember I told you we're going to talk about tobacco. This is one thing that people laugh, because we're going to talk about old-time tobacco here, cigarettes, and Surgeon General warning smoking for health, blah, blah, 70% increase in mortality because of smokers over non-smokers. All of this is out there. 42% of adults have smoked. These numbers have jumped. But the problem is, what did they change? Well, they made it so tobacco can't advertise on TV. They can't do television ads anymore. They can't do certain things like they used to do. They had to put the warning labels on their stuff. The only thing that's on a warning label on a vape is, oh, nicotine can be addictive. There's nothing else in there about what other chemicals you may be ingesting in your body. Tobacco's profits are through the roof. Now this one, in 2010, the combined profits of the 6 leading tobacco companies was over $35.1 billion, which equals the profit of Microsoft, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's combined. If that's not a huge factor for you to look at, wow, okay? And that's still going on to this day. China, the #1 killer of people is tobacco. Again, we're seeing that most of the tobacco now in our country, most of the people that own it or are coming from other countries. Why is that a concern? Because we actually have standards on how they have to process it. Some of these other places do not have the same standards or same capabilities of testing. Now, this is going to talk about and shows the dollar percentages of what the amount of money made by big tobacco over just a couple of years, and you can see dramatic increases. And this is just a couple of the companies in the U.S. Philip Morris, British Tobacco, Imperial Tobacco, Altria Tobacco, Japan Tobacco, ITC. All of these have some basis here in the United States. Again, $29.6 billion by Philip Morris. Not the greatest of things. Well, then e-cigarettes came around. And e-cigarettes were threatening big tobacco because their sales jumped to $6.6 billion. And that was right around that September of 2019 when they started doing their advertising to youth, even though they'll say they didn't. And it's continued to grow. And it's jumped from, like I said, it was 1 in 5. It's probably 1 in 3 in high school now. And probably when we're talking about, it was 1 in 20 in middle school. We're probably closer to, honestly, I'm going to say between 9 out of every 20 have tried it. Or are doing it on a regular basis. It's that much of a pervasive change.
James Monsees and Adam Bowen have a lot in common.
I went to college as a...
Can you guys hear that?
...for science and art. Double majored in physics and studio art. Decided to apply to this program at Stanford. Wound up going to grad school at Stanford. We just had a lot in common, and one thing we also had in common was we were both smokers. We spent a lot of time together, smoked cigarettes together, and ultimately decided that we could do better.
When Monsi's and book.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. One of the things that with Juul, and I want you guys to hear, pay attention to what they talked about, what their majors were. Their majors were for product engineering and also art engineering. There's nothing in there that says that they are doing anything that has to do with the medical portion of it. But we're safer than big cigarettes. If I were to let this video play through, it's about 12 minutes, and we get to the end where a doctor's saying, you know, at one point I would have told you it was safer, but now I'm going to tell you, no, it's not. Because we've actually seen studies showing that it's not as safe. You know, like he said, he goes, it's safer for somebody than somebody who's been smoking for 20 years to get them onto something else to help control their addiction as long as they're going to quit. But it's not safe. It's not safer than a regular cigarette. And that's what people tend to think about. And that program that they talked about where they went for their master's degree, yeah, it was product marketing. So there's nothing in there that says, oh, we're going to do this safely. And this is the best part. Juul, which is the company that we were just talking about, which is our biggest problem we're running into, they get money from British Tobacco Company. Vuse, which again, they're getting money from another company. I need to move my screen a little bit.
There's a huge surge of high school using e-cigarettes or vaping.
Just me. Okay. All right. Hold on. Let me go back a screen. And again, you're now seeing where many of these companies are being invested into by Big Tobacco. Why would Big Tobacco get in with them? Because they want the money. They lost $6.6 billion in profits. Well, guess what? If we can invest into them and get it back and still get people hooked on our product, it's a win-win for them. So, you know, when people say, well, Big Tobacco isn't a problem anymore, BS. They're still getting their money out of you. It's just now they're getting into the kids. So there is some huge changes that are taking place. Now, this next video, I want you guys to watch this, and we are going to watch this whole video, just because the simple fact it does provide a lot of information that is definitely pertainable to many of you.
There's been a huge surge of high schoolers using e-cigarettes or vaping. E-cigarettes, though, carry a number of health risks. CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta has more now. And in some ways, they were turning these because they thought they were safer than traditional cigarettes, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Erica. Like you and I have kids who are about to be going into high school pretty soon. And as far as high school fads, which often come and go, this one seems to be sticking, and there's a lot of concern about it, exactly for the reason you mentioned. There is a perceived harmlessness with this, but that's not the case. Take a look. In Milford, Connecticut, high school principal Francis Thompson is desperately trying to snuff out a problem that teachers are having all across the country.
They would come in here, you'd have 4 or 5 kids at a time congregating, and they'd start to vape.
It's a trend that many parents are not even aware of. But e-cigarette use, or vaping, has grown an astonishing 900% among high school students in recent years, according to the Surgeon General. And a 2016 National Youth Tobacco Survey found nearly 1.7 million high school students and 500,000 middle schoolers had used e-cigarettes in just the 30-day period before the survey was taken. In Rentham, Massachusetts, Assistant Vice Principal Spencer Christie says he too is overwhelmed by this new and pervasive epidemic.
Our Juul pods. Now it's moved to students vaping in hallways, vaping in classrooms.
In the back 2 desks in the corner, they had their hands kind of up like this, and there was a blue light coming from between their hands.
The most popular item, which is the Juul, and as you can see, it looks like a flash drive. It's not. And then the kids can just tuck it away when they're done. So
it's not just the design of these products. Critics say all these flavors also entice kids to start vaping. One study out of Harvard found some of these artificial flavors contain diacetyl. That's a chemical linked to severe respiratory disease.
The kids that I talk to believe that there's nothing in there that's dangerous. They don't think there's anything more than water. It's not water. It's called e-liquid. And when heated by the coil, it changes to an aerosol. Columbia University researchers using this machine found the vapor has toxic metals like chromium, nickel, zinc, and lead. And as we know, there is no safe level of lead. With very little regulation, people are not fully aware of what they're consuming. I sat down with the FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, and asked him about this e-cig phenomenon.
Youth use is deeply concerning to me. We're going to be taking some enforcement actions very soon to target companies that we think are marketing products in ways that they're deliberately appealing to kids. I'm going to be having conversations with some of these companies, trying to inspire them, if I can, to take more corrective actions on their own.
Don't forget, nicotine is one of the most addictive substances out there. I think it's the next teenager. Remember, Erica, e-cigarettes were marketed really as a smoking cessation tool, get people off of cigarettes. And there is some evidence that maybe in adults that has worked. But what's happening with kids, again, 900% increase over a 5-year period. Many parents are completely unaware of this. So those numbers are going up, and many of those kids, a quarter of them are turning to regular combustible cigarettes as well. So It's a huge problem.
It really is. Sanjay, good to have you here and good to highlight it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, you guys will realize right there, we had the head of the Food and Drug Administration saying he's going to reach out and try and entice these or encourage them to do different things. Why? Because guess what? There's a lot of money that these places are putting into the FDA and lobbying to make sure that it doesn't come up. According to the FDA, in 2020, Juul was supposed to go in front of them and provide education to them as to how their stuff is better than cigarettes and how it's safer. Now, because of the fact that that didn't happen, Juul argued and fought with this and actually pushed it back till 2025. So now that's 5 more years of them saying, oh, we're safe, but they still haven't proved it because they can't really prove it. There's nothing there showing that this is safer than regular cigarettes. So, and the other problem is, again, the FDA is saying, well, we're going to encourage them to, because there's no regulations on it at this point in time. Does that make, that's where some of this comes in. There is no regulations. The FDA can't regulate something until they've actually done the studies on it. Well, you know, those studies are in the process of happening, but there's nothing out there to actually force them or enforce regulations against these companies. And again, they're putting enough money into the lobbying to push it back and push it back and push it back. So it's not much different. The other thing to think about, like I said, big tobacco, when they originally came out, the tobacco industry marketed itself in a great way. You know, the first thing they did is during World War I, World War II, is they gave our GIs packs of cigarettes. Why? To give them something to think about, something that reminds them of home. And we gave it to them. No, they didn't give it to them because of that. They knew it was addictive and they knew they'd have to continue to buy it. It's just like any other drug dealer. I'll give you something for free. No, you're not giving it to them for free. You're giving it to them because you know they'll get addicted and then they're going to come back and they're going to have to buy it from you anyway. And that's what we're running into with the e-cigarettes. And when you talk about this being targeted to kids, like I said, there were several videos out and presentations that were out where these were high on videos, where people were watching this and going, hey, this person's vaping on stage. And it still happens to this day. Why? Because people will say, oh, there's no regulation against that. You can't smoke in the building, but there's certain places where they will allow people to vape. Again, there's not that training and knowledge out there of the first hand, second hand, third hand. Now this is something I want you guys to see. This is hidden in plain sight. Every one of those things on that picture right here, I think, can you guys see my cursor? Or no? Okay, so every one of those, you're looking at it going, okay, and normally what we do is put up there and go, which one of these is real and which one of them is a vape device? They're all vape devices. Every single one up there is a vape device. These are vape devices here. This is a vape device watch. Why do you need a watch that looks like a vape device? Why does an adult need that? Oh, they don't. Who does? Kids. This is even better. It's built into the ties on the sweatshirt. This has got it. You know how you got your water pack on your carriers? This has got it built into where you'd have your water displacement thing for getting your water out of your backpack. No, it's your vape device. A pen that functions as a pen, but it's truly a vape device. All of these are things that we need to make sure we're looking at. Okay? Why? Because guess what? They're here. And these are just the bare minimum of some of these. So to think that, you know, none of us as adults, we don't need it. I don't need a vape device in my, if I wanted to vape, I can have a vape and I can do it all day long and nobody can say a word to me about it. I don't need a sweatshirt that's got it built into the ties. So just saying, again, can you spot the vape device? They're all vape devices. Every one of those is a vape device. So this is why we're doing this, because you can't tell me you're not marketing to kids and you're making products that look like this. And Juul, being the great sound company that they were, that they limited and got rid of some of their flavors of, you know, some of the fruit flavored nicotine devices. They will no longer sell certain ones, but we're going to keep like the vanilla and we're going to keep this one and this one. Yeah, they got rid of certain flavors. They got rid of the ones that weren't selling. That's what they did. They, you know, they can tell you all day long, oh, well, we keep the ones that the adults want. No, they didn't. They kept the ones that didn't sell. That's what they did. They got rid of the flavors that they thought the kids would want and the kids don't want. Okay? So they got rid of bubblegum flavored. Well, no offense. Bubblegum flavored smoke probably doesn't taste good. You know, they got rid of certain flavors, but again, it was flavors that nobody wanted. And this, hold on. Now, this is one of these funny things. Now, this is a Juul device. There's a video here. This is a 10-minute video of how you can take your, because Juul will say, oh, our product is just for cigarettes. It can never be used for marijuana or this or that. This is a 10-minute video of how to turn your Juul into a vape device to use marijuana and THC chemicals, and put it into your Juul, so nobody knows that you're not smoking weed. And the funny thing is, Juul's like, oh, this is not. You know where we found this link? It was off of Juul's website. So just saying. I know there's some questions. I can see that, and there's some chat questions. I'm actually done with my portion of the presentation at this point, and we'll try and answer some of those questions here. I'm going to end my screen sharing here.
Thank you, Matt. That was a lot. So I'll go right into one of the questions that I'm seeing here. Do you have any suggestions for monitoring vaping? There's a lot of it being snuck into the school.
Well, many of the schools, and actually I believe almost every one of our schools in our county has gone to the point of they have installed vape monitoring devices in the bathrooms. Sandusky actually went to a point there for a while. There was only one girls' bathroom and only one boys' bathroom open in the entire school. They locked all the other ones down, and they had somebody standing outside monitoring it. Why? Because this is such a huge issue. And I know Deckerville has them installed, and now they're running into the situation that they walked in the one day and the vape devices had duct tape over top of them. Why? Because the kids duct taped it shut so it wouldn't catch that they were vaping in the bathroom still. So, I mean, there's different things that are out there. The vape monitoring, those are great, but again, the biggest thing we need to do is make sure we're getting the education to the families. That's why I will do this presentation for adults. I'll do it for schools. I will do it for anybody, for the simple fact of, we're losing too many kids to this, and we need to stop it. And that's my goal of making sure that this is something that we're not going to continue to have a problem with.
Seems like a monstrous problem.
And it is. There's no right answer, unfortunately. Like I said, I think the best thing that we can do, and I was very glad. I had a school actually ask me come in, do this presentation for the entire school. I've done it several times in Sandusky to the 8th graders. I've done it to the 7th graders. Why? Because the simple fact of when you give them the education and the knowledge, many of them will make the right decisions. And when you start showing them that, hey, these companies aren't doing this because they're trying to do something to make you look cool. They're doing this because they know they've got you hooked on their drugs. Kids
all about the money.
Decisions. Yeah, that's all it's about. And like I said, it was amazing because I actually did this presentation in Cass City, and the one girl looks at me and goes, yeah. And she turns and she goes, if you go down to this store down there, they've got every one of those vape devices for sale. And the parents were like, what? And she knew. She's like, oh yeah, that's where my friends go and get theirs. And she was only, at the time, 14. So, believe me, it's... And the other thing, like, we just ran into, I actually have a pack in my car where I have a pack of like 25 vape devices that are all brand new. They were taken off a student who went and bought a bunch of them, 18-year-old, went and bought a bunch of them, and he brought them to school and he was selling them to the junior high kids. Why? Because he could. Okay? You used to worry about the kids passing the dope in the school and this and that. My God, these vape devices have taken over. Because they can be used for so many different things. And they're so addictive.
What is the age that limits on purchasing the equipment and the product?
Many of them it's 18, depending on the store. But many places it's 18, just like tobacco.
And when you want to dispose of those, the devices, what's the proper way to do that?
Well, that's part of the problem we're running into. Again, many of them have a battery system in it that will cause a problem with many of our normal trash compactors and trash issues, because we're now putting more chemicals into our system than what we had been in the past. There isn't a good answer. And then, some of these, quite a few of these are actually rechargeable. You literally pull that part out that looks like you've got certain parts of them where they just literally plug in to a computer and it recharges it.
Yeah, it's a USB port.
Right. Some of them, the USB port is the other way. And that's your part where you actually have your chemicals. But again, it all depends on how it works. So, it's very easy to hide this stuff. And again, that's why we talk about it.
Well, the problem is it doesn't sound like it has to be hidden in the homes because it's a whole family doing, the same type of activity.
And we've ran into that a lot where I've actually had parents tell me, well, I bought my son the vape device because I thought it was better than the cigarettes. Well, then we educated them on that, and the parents looked at me and went, oh, I didn't know. That's not how it's marketed. Right, you're right. It's not marketed that way. And again, part of our issue is the FDA doesn't have teeth into this system where we can do something with it.
Are there studies being done currently that will lead to some data that can be used?
Yes, those studies, again, when I talk about Dr. Francis Leslie over at University of California, Irvine, some of these are also being done at the University of Michigan here. Michigan State University is doing several of them. They're actually being done all across the country because everybody's running into this same problem with the people with the vape lung, the VLI, the increased of problems with, we're running into, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who have basically arthrosclerosis because their lungs are hardened and stiffened. Where it used to be, they look at guys my size and go, oh, maybe you should change what you eat. But if I change what I eat, it'll get better. There's nothing we can do that can fix this for these kids. That's what we're running into the problem for.
Not really good information in terms of happy times, but absolutely important for our community to understand the impact that these vaping devices are having, not just on our teens, but our adults as well.
Right.
It really is time for us to share this out and make sure that we're telling the truth, because obviously the companies that are putting it out are doing it for the money and they don't want you to know the truth.
Right. And, it's just like big tobacco. Like I said, big tobacco used to be, oh, this is the way it used to be. This is how we do things. And, oh, it was good for you. Remember, they actually had doctors that were saying, oh, don't worry, you can smoke while you're pregnant. It won't harm the baby. It doesn't. It's good for you and the baby. Why? Because there was no studies proving otherwise.
Probably dating myself, but I remember the Marlboro Man.
Yep.
That's what every young boy wanted to grow up and be.
Correct.
So.
And, those are things that we're still running into. And that's one of the problems that we're trying to hopefully fix.
Do we have any more questions for Matt? Well, I want to thank you, Matt. Honestly, on behalf of the Healthy Living Planning Group, we really appreciate you bringing this very important health information to our group and allowing us to share it out into the community.
No problem.
As a wrap up, I want to thank all of our attendees and let you know that next month, in July, on the 20th, we will be having Healthy Living Together and hosting Christina Meyer, who's going to talk to us about gut health. So at this point, I guess it's thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Matt, for presenting. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month.
Thank you.